Hi, in today's video, let's see some of the basic triggers that we use in n8n to start the workflow automations. Okay, so the first and the basic one is the manual trigger. As the name suggests, it's a manual way of starting your workflow. So this is how the manual trigger looks like. If you just pull out any node from n8n, it looks like this. I mean, you see the gray outline, right? But when you execute it, when it runs successfully, it turns green. So this is how you know your workflow has executed. But now this is just a starting trigger, manual trigger, and then we just don't have anything in this workflow. So let me just create one simple hello world kind of a workflow where we just print some statement onto the n8n console. So for that, I'm just pulling out the edit node. So this edit node, if I connect it like this is my simplest workflow where I will use this edit node to write something onto the canvas. Okay, I will say this is a test. The message I want to write is this is what I want to print it when the workflow runs. And then after this, I just don't want to do anything more. So I will close this workflow by ending it with a no operation. So no operation is like no operation. There is nothing to be done here. Okay, so let us, because this is a manual trigger, you have to trigger it. And then I'm triggering the workflow now. Okay, now let us see the workflow has executed successfully from this. Now let us see how the logs look. You see, the log success logs, it shows that we have executed the workflow, edit fields, and all the three nodes. And the input was, this is the input that has given, it has printed that, the output was printed here. This is an 18, okay. So now, as I said, this is a manual trigger, and after this manual trigger, you can have any set of nodes that will help you to create your workflow automation. Okay, so let's quickly move to the next one, the schedule trigger. I'll remove this node and then start the workflow with a schedule node. As you see, the schedule node is something that will help you to schedule the interval of the workflow execution. There is an interval that you can configure with respect to this seconds, minutes, hours, and days and weeks and stuff like that. So for now, we will see with seconds so that it is easy for us to see what is happening. Okay, now I'm just doing the running the same workflow with a schedule trigger. Now the schedule trigger is set for 30 seconds. Now I'm just doing it because now though it is schedule trigger, you can also start it manually. That is how I have run this. You can see the timestamp 6:01. Okay, and for the schedule trigger to run, it is important that it is in the active state. Okay, now this workflow is running, and then how do I see this workflow is running or not? Because it is active now. I'll go to executions, refresh, auto refresh. Okay, you see, now let us wait for one more. 6:1 it has executed, and by 6:2 you should see one more because every 30 seconds are, you see, just in 14 milliseconds. It took 14 milliseconds to run, but yeah, it has run in 30 seconds. Again, the second execution has happened. So this is how the schedule trigger works. And when do you use schedule trigger? When you have a periodicity of your workflow to run. Like, you know, morning 10 o'clock, you want to read your inbox and then sort mails or draft a mail. You know, there is like certain set of operations that you want to do periodically. That is where you set a schedule trigger. Now you see the second workflow, 6 to 30 seconds. Schedule trigger works. So now let us go back to the editor again. And now that this workflow is doing much of the stuff apart from just outputting something onto the console, let us deactivate this and also remove the workflow and see how the chat trigger works. This is the chat trigger. as the name suggests, you have to chat, send us a message, then automatically the chat trigger will initiate. Because it's a chat trigger, there is a chat box that will pop up for you to type something. I will say hi. Now see, sending a chat message is the trigger point for this workflow to start. Same thing happened. Now that we have some input that is coming from the chat, right? So we can also use this message to do something with our print statement that we have used. So we will say hi, and then we are adding that whatever that is coming from the chat input is going into the output of what we want to display. Then I will say message now. This is n8n was the original message, and how are you is what I said. Now that got appended. Yeah, so this workflow, you see that whenever there is like no, you're working with AI automations, that is where you use a chat input to, just like the prompt that you use in ChatGPT to start a workflow, which is like typically an AI automation. Or it doesn't have to be like what you have seen. It's a normal automation where you're trying to print something, do something. Okay, so let's quickly move to our form trigger. As the name suggests, this is like on submission of a form, this workflow will get initiated or triggered or executed, whatever. Okay, so now this is a form, so there should be a form that is, when you fill in this form, automatically the it will trigger the workflow. So I'm just creating a sample form here. I'm putting the elements into the form. I'm just taking the name. Maybe this time I will use a radio button. I have like two boxes. Like the form will take my name. It will ask me a question, give me the options in a radio button. This is my form that I've created. And when I execute this workflow, a form will pop up. And when I submit that form, that will become the trigger point for the workflow to start. So let's see how this works. See now this form that I just created in front of you has popped up. This is, let me see something here. Okay, now you see the form has been submitted and then the workflow is executed. Okay, so now that I'm getting some data from this form, so I can use that data to do something. So let me just use the same thing. I have a name, it's my interest. Okay, so this is what I want to do. So let me execute once again. The output is my name is ABC, my interest in AI is yes. Okay, so this is how the form trigger works. So far we have seen some basic triggers like the manual trigger where you start by clicking this execute workflow, the workflow will start. The schedule trigger where you set a timing and then periodically that will run. Chat trigger, when you give a chat message, the workflow will start. A form trigger, when a form gets submitted, the workflow will start. Now these are like very fundamental triggers. There are many other kind of triggers as well, and many more application triggers like the Gmail trigger. And you can also find like all of the applications. Suppose if you just click Gmail, you see there is a trigger. Okay, so any application that you are using and then there is this trigger, then these triggers are also possible. So this is like when you want to initiate a workflow when a mail comes into your inbox. And before using Gmail trigger, you will have to authenticate yourself so that it knows that this is your account. So once that is done, you will be able to create some of the Gmail automations that will help you to sort your email, read your mail, summarize your emails, label them, draft mails, and a lot of other stuff. And the starting point of all those automations obviously is going to be when the Gmail comes into your inbox, right? That is where you use the Gmail trigger. Just not Gmail trigger, there are many kind of applications that you can use. You can create workflow automations. And if you see any of the app, like suppose like there is like a Telegram app. Now it has got many triggering points, like in terms of when you read a message, when you receive a message, somebody's like posting on your channel, and you receive a message. If there is a poll, you got a shipping query. So based on the kind of workflows that you build, you can use these triggers, and then those will be your entry points. But the most commonly fundamentally used workflow or triggers would be like the manual trigger when you're like testing out something, when you're building and then testing, until like the workflow is ready. That is where you use manual trigger. Once the workflow is like ready and then it is working perfectly fine, and then you want to schedule it so that it runs automatically, that is where you use a schedule trigger. Chat trigger is generally mostly is used when you use AI automations. On form trigger, if you are doing some kind of like surveys and then collecting information, and then that is like your starting point to create the workflows, that is where you use it on form trigger. And there are many applications like Gmail, Telegram that you have saw that you can use based on your kind of use case and scenario that you're building. You can use those application based triggers as well. Okay, thank you for watching. Now it's time for you to practice.